Imagine this. One moment, a hero is battling a raging inferno. The next, he's gone, vanished without a trace, swallowed whole by smoke and flames. No struggle, no clues, just an empty helmet, silent alarms, and a mystery colder than the ashes left behind. For 5 long years, his family waited, the case frozen solid, until a bulldozer's blade struck something buried deep beneath the ruins. What surfaced wasn't just evidence. It was a secret screaming from the grave, rewriting a nightmare everyone thought they knew. This is the chilling, true story of the firefighter who disappeared into thin air, and the buried truth that finally brought him home. If this mystery gripped you, hit that subscribe button now. We uncover shocking true stories and unsolved cases every single day, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I'd love to see how far this mystery reaches. The fluorescent lights of Fire Station 17 hummed a low, constant drone, cutting through the heavy silence of the November night. Outside, rain lashed against the grimy bay windows, sounding like 1,000 frantic fingers tapping. Inside, the air hung thick with the familiar scents: stale coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and the ever-present, deep-down smell of old smoke embedded in the very walls. Captain Ben Carter leaned back in the cracked vinyl chair, the springs groaning in protest. He stared blankly at the local news, playing silently on the mounted TV, the flickering images reflecting in his tired eyes. The clock above the kitchenette read 10:47 p.m. November 3rd, 2018. Just another quiet shift stretching into the small hours. Across the worn carpet, firefighter Mike Riley sat at the scarred wooden table, bathed in the harsh overhead light. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and solid, built for the job. But his movements were gentle, almost meticulous as he polished his helmet. The yellow paint gleamed under his careful ministrations, the reflective strips catching the light. His full turnout gear, coat, pants, boots, lay neatly arranged on the bench beside the massive red engine bay doors, ready to be pulled on in seconds. Another quiet one, Mike murmured, his voice a low, comfortable rumble that fit his frame. He didn't look up from his task. Hope it stays that way. Lily's got that school play tomorrow afternoon. Promise Sarah I'd be there front row. Ben grunted, dragging a hand over his stubbled jaw. Don't jinx it, Riley. Murphy's Law loves this shift. He knew Mike wasn't jinxing anything. It was just the hopeful murmur of a man who loved his family more than anything. Mike Riley was a rock. 8 years on the job, 2 commendations for bravery under intense conditions. He lived for the camaraderie of the station, the fierce love for his wife Sarah, and the bright, boundless energy of his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The idea of Mike Riley choosing to vanish was as absurd as the rain stopping mid-fall. He was dependable, rooted, the kind of guy you'd trust with your life, and many had. The heavy silence was shattered at precisely 11:08 p.m. The station alarm erupted, a shrieking, electronic wail that bypassed thought and went straight to the gut. Simultaneously, the dispatcher's voice, clipped and urgent, blared from the speakers. Asterisk all units, Station 17, respond to structure fire, 2245, Industrial Parkway. Multiple calls reporting large warehouse fully involved. Flames visible. Proceed code 3, asterisk. Chaos erupted, a controlled frenzy born of relentless training. Boots pounded on the concrete floor. Metal lockers banged open. The deep, throaty roar of the fire engines igniting vibrated through the building. Ben Carter was instantly transformed from weary captain to commanding officer. Move it, people. Full turnout. Engine 1, ladder 3, roll now. His voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear. Mike Riley moved with the fluid efficiency of muscle memory. The polishing rag was forgotten. He yanked on his heavy, heat-resistant Nomex pants, stepped into his boots, shrugged into the massive coat, and fastened the buckles with swift, sure hands. He grabbed his SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, pack, checking the gauge, full air tank. Ben pointed towards him, locking eyes. Riley, you're on Nozzle Team Alpha. East flank entry. Mike gave a single, sharp nod, his face settling into the focused, almost serene mask he always wore before stepping into the inferno. No fear, just pure concentration. Copy that, Cap. His voice was steady, calm beneath the adrenaline. Within 90 seconds of the alarm, Engine 1 and Ladder 3 were screaming out of the bay doors, sirens tearing through the drumming rain, red and white lights painting the wet asphalt in frantic, swirling patterns. The industrial park was a dark maze at night, but the fire was an undeniable beacon. Long before they reached 2245 Industrial Parkway, an angry orange glow pulsed against the low, rain-heavy clouds. As they rounded the final corner, the scale of the blaze hit them like a physical blow. The warehouse wasn't just burning, it was being consumed. Towering flames roared through the collapsed sections of the corrugated metal roof, reaching hungrily for the sky. Thick, greasy black smoke billowed upwards in colossal, churning columns, swallowing the rain and the stars. Even blocks away, the acrid stench of burning chemicals and plastics stung their nostrils inside the cab. Ben established command from the mobile unit parked a safe distance back, his face illuminated by the flickering dashboard lights and the hellish glow from the fire. Radio traffic crackled constantly. Engine 1 establishing water supply from Hydrant Bravo. Ladder 3 setting up aerial on the west side. Ben keyed his mic, his voice tight. Alpha Team, report position. Mike's voice came through the speaker, slightly muffled by his breathing apparatus mask, but calm, controlled. Asterisk Alpha advancing on east flank now. Cap heavy smoke, intense heat. Making push towards main storage area. Asterisk, the sound of water hissing violently against superheated metal and roaring flames was audible in the background. Copy, Alpha, Ben responded, his eyes scanning the unstable structure. Sections of the outer wall glowed cherry red. Be advised that east wall looks compromised. Roof structure unstable. Watch for collapse. He could picture Mike and his partner, Jake Peterson, crouched low, the powerful stream from their hose cutting a path through the smoke and heat near the building's eastern perimeter. Understood, Mike replied. Making progress, heat's intense, pushing forward. There was a burst of static, then relative quiet on Alpha Team's channel for a few minutes, filled only with the background chaos of the firefight, the roar of the blaze, the shouts of other crews, the constant rush of water. Then, at 11:42 p.m., a cold finger of unease traced Ben's spine. Alpha Team hadn't reported in. Alpha Team, Engine 1 command. Status report. Riley, Peterson, sound off. Silence crackled back. Not the white noise of an open channel, but an empty, dead silence. Alpha Team, respond. Mike, Jake, report your position. Ben's voice hardened, urgency sharpening each word. Nothing. Just the unsettling hiss of static. That cold feeling bloomed into full-blown dread, colder than the November rain, soaking his turnout coat collar. He immediately triggered the emergency evacuation siren, a piercing wail that cut over the fire's roar. All units, Mayday, Mayday, Firefighter down, Alpha Team position, unaccounted for personnel, Initiat PIR. Personnel accountability, report now. Panic, raw and immediate, surged through the crews. Hoses were dropped. Firefighters near the east flank scrambled back, shouting Mike and Jake's names into the blinding smoke. Jake Peterson stumbled out of the thickest smoke near the base of the east wall moments later. Coughing violently, his face mask askew, eyes wide with terror and confusion. He collapsed near the command vehicle, gasping for air. Mike, he choked out, pointing a trembling glove towards the wall. He was right there, right beside me. We were hitting the base of the flames. The smoke, it just rolled over us thick and black. Like a wave. I called his name. I reached out, but he was gone. Just gone. His voice broke. 1 second he was there, Cap. The next, vanished. A frantic, desperate search commenced immediately, concentrated on the area Jake indicated near the east wall. Firefighters formed a human chain, sweeping powerful beams of light through the choking, swirling smoke. They probed piles of debris, kicked aside fallen insulation and burning timbers, calling Mike's name over and over, their voices hoarse with smoke and fear. Other crews quickly confirmed no one had exited the collapse zone via other routes. The perimeter security established early on reported no breaches. It was a confined area, shrouded in smoke, but Mike Riley, a large man in bulky gear, had seemingly dissolved into the night air. Then, near the scorched base of the east wall, half buried in wet ash and fallen debris, a glint of yellow caught a flashlight beam. Ben Carter's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed forward. It was Mike's helmet, undamaged. Beside it, lying neatly coiled, was the communication cord leading to his helmet radio. The radio itself was missing. Nearby, they found his SCBA backplate and harness, the heavy air tank still attached. The tank's pressure gauge read 0. Empty. But crucially, the main valve on the tank was found in the closed position. The high-pressure hose leading to his mask was disconnected. And most chillingly, Mike's pass device, the personal alert safety system every firefighter wears, designed to emit an ear-splitting, unmissable shriek if the wearer is motionless for more than 30 seconds, was silent. Stone-cold silent. Later forensic examination would confirm it had been manually switched off. Mike Riley, 34 years old, had vanished from the heart of an active, dangerous fire scene. He hadn't been crushed, hadn't succumbed to smoke inhalation. His air tank, while empty, was valved off, suggesting controlled breathing before disconnection, not a sudden failure or depletion. His gear, except for the missing radio and the disconnected SCBA, was found essentially in place. There were no drag marks, no signs of struggle in the mud and ash around the site. No one saw him walk away. No tracks led out of the secured perimeter except those of the responding firefighters. It was as if, amidst the roaring chaos, the blinding smoke, and the pounding rain, Michael James Riley had simply stepped out of his protective shell and ceased to exist. The rain intensified, washing over the smoldering ruins and the baffled, terrified firefighters, erasing any faint trace that might have remained, leaving behind only a yawning, inexplicable void and the chilling certainty that a good man, a devoted father and husband, had disappeared without a single logical clue. The fire was eventually extinguished, leaving a skeleton of blackened metal. But the real mystery, cold and impenetrable, had only just begun. The rain that fell 5 years ago seemed to have seeped into the very bones of Fire Station 17. A perpetual dampness clung to the air, a cold that no amount of engine heat or shared coffee could fully dispel. Captain Ben Carter felt it most acutely when he passed the empty locker, Mike Riley's locker. It hadn't been reassigned. A silent monument, a raw wound that refused to heal. Inside, untouched since that November night in 2018, lay a faded photo of Sarah and Lily Riley smiling on a sunnier day, a stark contrast to the gray weight pressing down on the station. 5 years. August 16th, 2023. The official case file on Mike Riley's disappearance had long gathered dust in the cold case archives. Hope was a ghost. Ben sat at his cluttered desk. The drone of the ceiling fan, the only sound besides the scratch of his pen on a supply requisition form. The date glared up at him from the top corner. 5 years. He remembered Sarah's face on the news, remembered the desperate searches, the hollow explanations that explained nothing. Suicide? Mike, who lived for his family and his crew. Foul play? With no evidence, no motive, no witnesses? An accident swallowed whole by the inferno? Yet his gear was found placed, not torn away. The pass device turned off. It gnawed at Ben, a relentless, unsolvable equation. Sarah Riley, once vibrant, now carried a quiet brittleness. She worked long hours as a nurse, her eyes holding a depth of sorrow that time hadn't softened. 6-year-old Lily was now 11, a solemn girl who remembered her father mostly through stories and photographs. They visited the station sometimes, birthdays, holidays, a painful ritual of remembrance. Ben saw the questions Lily no longer asked aloud, saw the way Sarah's hand would unconsciously tighten around her daughter's shoulder. The community had moved on, the faded missing posters long since weathered away or covered by new advertisements. Mike Riley was a tragic footnote, a chilling campfire story whispered among new probies about the firefighter who vanished into smoke. Across town, the scar of the 2245 Industrial Parkway fire remained. The burnt-out skeleton of the warehouse had been demolished the year after the fire, the land deemed contaminated and left fallow. Weeds pushed through cracked concrete slabs, rusted scraps of metal poked from the earth like broken bones. It was an eyesore avoided by most. Developers, however, saw potential. Excavation for a new logistics center began in early July 2023. Giant yellow machines tore into the earth, scraping away layers of charred debris and compacted soil. On the morning of August 16, 2023, a warm, humid Wednesday, a bulldozer operator named Ray Kowalski was working near the eastern perimeter of the old warehouse footprint, roughly where the collapsed east wall had been. The blade bit deep, scraping against something hard and metallic buried about 3 feet down. Not unusual on this site, they found burnt machinery parts, twisted rebar. Ray hopped down from his cab, wiping sweat from his brow, curious. He kicked aside loose dirt and ash. It wasn't rebar. It was a rectangular, scorched black box, partially crushed, wires trailing from one end. He recognized it vaguely. Looked like the radios firefighters used. "Hey, Chuck," Ray yelled over the engine noise to his foreman, Chuck Henderson, who was surveying nearby. "Found some old junk radio. Probably from the fire crew that worked this mess years back." He picked it up. It was heavy, caked in mud and something dark like old dried oil. The plastic casing was warped from heat, the antenna bent. Chuck ambled over, squinting. "Fire radio? Huh, probably busted. Toss it in the scrap pile." He started to turn away. Ray frowned, turning the heavy object in his hands. He saw a faint symbol under the grime, a stylized flame logo, and a small, almost illegible serial number etched into the metal casing. SF 17-043. Something tickled his memory. Wasn't there the firefighter guy? Disappeared right here? Long time ago. Ray wasn't local. He'd moved to the area only 2 years prior, but he'd heard the bar talk, the local ghost story. Chuck stopped, turning back slowly. The name surfaced from the murk of half-remembered news reports. Riley. Mike Riley. Yeah, vanished fighting this fire. 5 years back, maybe. A flicker of unease crossed his face. Weird place for his radio to be buried, if it's his. He took the radio from Ray. It felt unnervingly heavy, a relic from a tragedy. Scrap pile might not be right. Maybe we should call in? Just in case. Ray shrugged, already mentally moving to the next task. "Your call, boss. Looks like trash to me." He climbed back into his dozer cab. Chuck Henderson stood holding the grimy radio, the humid sun suddenly feeling too hot. He wasn't a superstitious man, but the coincidence felt heavy wrong. He remembered the news footage, the distraught wife, the little girl. He sighed, walked back to his pickup truck, and placed the radio carefully on the passenger seat floor mat. Later that afternoon, after wrestling with the decision, he drove to the local police station's non-emergency entrance. "Found this at the old warehouse site," Chuck told the bored-looking desk sergeant, placing the radio on the counter. "Guy working there mentioned it might be connected to that missing firefighter." Riley? Figured better safe than sorry. He pushed it forward. "Looks like it's been buried a long time." The sergeant, Officer Danvers, peered at the filthy object without touching it. "Riley? That's ancient history. Probably just junk from the fire." But procedure was procedure. He pulled on a latex glove, picked up the radio, and noted the flame logo and the partial serial number, SF 17-043. He logged it into the evidence system with minimal interest. Possible fire service artifact recovered from 2245 Industrial Parkway excavation, and tagged it for storage. It sat in a dusty evidence locker for 3 days. On August 19th, a young evidence technician named Lisa Chun was processing a backlog of items. She picked up the bag containing the charred radio. The notation mentioned possible connection to Riley case. Lisa was new, meticulous. She remembered the Riley disappearance vaguely from her criminology studies. It was a local legend, a textbook perfect mystery. Curiosity piqued, she decided to clean the radio carefully, hoping to reveal a clearer serial number. Under layers of grime and corrosion, she painstakingly revealed the full etching. SF 17-043. A quick search in the department's property database confirmed it. The radio had been issued to Firefighter Michael J. Riley, Station 17. Evidence tag #FD 2018-112. Logged as missing from the scene on November 4th, 2018. Lisa's pulse quickened. This wasn't just junk. This was a piece of evidence from an ice-cold, baffling disappearance, found buried 3 feet underground on the exact spot where Mike Riley was last seen. Protocol demanded she notify the lead detective on the original case, even if it was suspended. Detective Alan Miller, now nearing retirement, had carried the Riley case like a stone in his shoe. When Lisa's call came, the professional detachment he'd cultivated over decades evaporated instantly. He was at the evidence locker within 20 minutes. Miller, a gray-haired man with weary eyes, examined the radio through the clear evidence bag. It was Mike Riley's. Confirmed. The implications slammed into him. Buried. Not lost in the rubble. Not swept away by the rain or the fire hoses. Buried. 3 feet down. That required intent. Time. Opportunity that simply didn't exist during the chaotic firefight or the immediate, frantic search that followed. His next call was to Ben Carter. Ben was checking engine fluid levels when his phone rang. Seeing Miller's name, a familiar, dull ache resurfaced. "Detective, what can I do for you?" His voice was flat. "Ben," Miller's tone was uncharacteristically tight, urgent. "We need you down at the station. Now. Evidence locker. Something significant has turned up." Ben felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garage temperature. Significant? Related to Mike. "It's his radio, Ben. They found it." Ben's hand tightened on the phone. "Found it? Where? When?" The questions tumbled out. "At the warehouse site. During the new excavation. Buried. About 3 feet down." The world tilted. The sounds of the station, the distant chatter, the hum of the fridge, faded into a high-pitched whine. Buried. That single word shattered the fragile theories, the accepted narrative of chaotic loss. Someone had put that radio in the ground. After the fire. After the searches. After Mike vanished. Ben leaned heavily against the cool metal of the fire engine. "I'm on my way," he managed, his voice rough. Sitting across from Detective Miller in the sterile, fluorescent-lit evidence viewing room, Ben stared at the bagged radio on the table. It looked alien malevolent. The grime, the damage, the bent antenna, it spoke of violence, of concealment. Miller laid out the facts. Found August 16th, 2023, approximately 3 feet below the surface near the former east wall location. No other items recovered nearby. The excavation had been ongoing for weeks. This was the first significant find. "The techs want to examine it forensically," Miller said quietly, watching Ben's face pale under the harsh lights. "See if there's anything, DNA, prints, damage patterns, anything that tells us how it got there, or who put it there." Ben couldn't take his eyes off the radio. It was the key piece missing from the puzzle, but its discovery only deepened the mystery into something far darker. The past device turned off, the gear found placed, and now the radio, deliberately buried years after the fire. This wasn't an accident. This was a Mike walking away. This was something else. Something calculated. Something hidden. The ghost of Mike Riley had just become something much more tangible and infinitely more terrifying. The cold ember of the case flared violently back to life, casting long, unsettling shadows across 5 years of silence. The unsettling mystery had just taken a sharp, chilling turn into the realm of the deliberate and the buried. The air in the police evidence viewing room hung thick and still, charged with the weight of the charred radio lying on the sterile steel table between them. Detective Miller's words, deliberately buried, echoed in Ben Carter's skull like a physical blow. The sterile fluorescent lights seemed suddenly harsh, bleaching the color from everything except the grim artifact before them. Mike Riley's radio. Evidence tag #PD 2023-817. Recovered August 16, 2023. Depth 3 feet. Location Grid E7, former East Wall Perimeter, 2245 Industrial Parkway. It changes everything, Ben finally rasped, his voice sounding alien to his own ears. His gaze remained locked on the bent antenna, the heat-warped casing, the mud, and something darker caked into its crevices. Someone put it there? After. Long after. Miller nodded grimly, pulling his glasses off to rub the bridge of his nose. Exactly. The initial search after the fire was exhaustive, Ben. You know that. They sifted through ash, moved debris. The demolition crew, the following year, scraped the surface clean. This radio wasn't missed because it was overlooked. It wasn't there to be found. Not then. It was placed deep enough to avoid the demolition machinery, shallow enough that current excavation would uncover it. A cold fury began to mix with the dread coiling in Ben's gut. So, after the fire, after the searches, after the demolition, someone came back. To the exact spot. Dug a hole. Buried Mike's radio. Why? Why leave the helmet and SCBA scattered, but bury this? Trophy, Miller suggested, his tone bleak. Or maybe a mistake. Something they realized later could be traced. So they hid it. But why not destroy it completely? Burying it preserved it. He tapped the evidence bag. Forensics is our next step. Lisa Chun is sharp. If there's anything on this DNA, prints, tool marks from whatever dug the hole, even soil traces that don't match the site, she'll find it. The radio was whisked away to the county forensic lab. The process was agonizingly slow. Days bled into a week. Ben tried to focus on station duties, but the empty locker, the memory of Sarah's haunted eyes when he'd last seen her, the image of that buried radio, they were constant companions. The oppressive August heat seemed to amplify the tension, pressing down on the town like a suffocating blanket. Detective Miller kept Ben updated with clip professionalism. Preliminary cleaning complete. Heavy charring consistent with intense heat exposure, but the internal components shielded somewhat by the casing. Minimal trace evidence recovered from exterior, mostly site soil and ash. Awaiting DNA swab analysis. No discernible fingerprints recovered. Exterior too damaged. Soil analysis underway, comparing particulates embedded deep within the casing to core samples from the burial site and surrounding areas. Each update felt like another dead end. The radio was just dirty, damaged, silent. Ben couldn't shield Sarah forever. The discovery, made on an active construction site, was local news by August 20th. Artifact linked 2 missing firefighter found at Old Blaze site. Ben called her before she saw the headline. Hearing her voice, the fragile control she'd built over 5 years shattering into jagged sobs over the phone, was worse than facing the fire again. He drove to her small, neat house that evening. Sarah sat on her porch swing, Lily, taller now, quieter, her father's eyes holding a depth of understanding no child should possess, sat close beside her, a protective arm around her mother's shoulders. Sarah's face was pale, etched with fresh grief. They found his radio? Barry. The word came out choked. Ben, what does it mean? Who would do that? Where is he? Her eyes searched his face, desperate for answers he didn't have. Lily just watched him, silent, her gaze unsettlingly direct. It means someone was there, Sarah, Ben said gently, lowering himself onto the porch step, feeling utterly inadequate. After the fire. It means it wasn't an accident. Not like we thought. The police, Miller, they're working on it. Forensics might tell us something. He couldn't voice the darker implications, that this pointed towards murder, towards a deliberate cover-up that had chilled for 5 years. Working on it, Sarah echoed, a tremor of bitterness in her voice. Like they worked on it before? For 5 years, nothing. And now, a buried radio? She looked out at the quiet street, the setting sun painting the houses in warm hues that felt like a cruel mockery. It just opens it all up again. The not knowing, it's worse now. Because now I know. I know someone took him. Hit him. A tear traced a path down her cheek. Lily squeezed her hand tighter. Ben stayed until the shadows lengthened, offering useless platitudes, sharing the sparse details Miller had authorized. He left feeling heavy with their shared burden, the weight of the unsolved mystery pressing harder than ever. Back at the station, the mood was somber. The news had reached the crew. Jake Peterson, Mike's partner that night, looked haunted. Buried? Like someone planted it? Why? Why Mike? The questions hung in the air, unanswered. The camaraderie felt strained, touched by a renewed unease. The ghost of Mike Riley wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a specter demanding justice, its presence made tangible by a piece of scorched plastic and metal. On August 25th, Detective Miller called Ben again. His voice held a new edge, a mix of frustration and burgeoning intensity. Forensics came back, Ben. Mostly negative. No usable DNA on the exterior or interior components beyond degraded traces, likely from Mike himself or general handling. No fingerprints. Soil analysis, inconclusive. Particulates are consistent with the burial site and the general warehouse soil profile. Nothing foreign jumped out. The radio itself, extensively damaged by heat and time. Corrosion on the circuits. Lisa says it's unlikely to ever power on again. Ben slumped in his office chair, the disappointment a physical ache. So nothing. A dead end. Again. Not quite. Miller countered, the intensity sharpening. The lack of evidence is telling. Whoever buried it was careful. Wore gloves, probably. Didn't leave anything obvious behind. But that's not all. Lisa, being thorough, didn't just look at the radio. She dug into its history, pulled the service logs from the fire department's records. Ben sat up straighter. Service logs? Yeah, maintenance records. Last checkup was 2 weeks before the fire. Routine. Passed. But she also requested the call logs from dispatch for that night. Specifically, the transmission logs tied to Mike's radio unit number. A cold prickle started at the base of Ben's neck. What did you find? The last confirmed transmission from Mike's radio, Miller said, his voice dropping lower, was at 11:39 p.m., November 3rd, 2018. Your call acknowledging the unstable roof. That matches the command log. Ben remembered. Right. Then silence. According to dispatch records, Miller continued, his radio's signal remained active on the network for another 3 minutes and 17 seconds. It went silent, dropped off the network at precisely 11:42 and 17 seconds p.m. Ben frowned. Active? But he didn't transmit anything. Jake didn't hear anything. No transmissions logged after 11:39 p.m., Miller confirmed. But the signal was still there. The radio was powered on, connected to the network, for over 3 minutes after his last transmission. And then, at 11 hours, 42 minutes and 17 seconds, it shut off. Or was shut off. The implications slammed into Ben. Mike's last words were calm, focused. Then, 3 minutes of radio silence while the signal remained active. Then, abrupt termination at 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 17 seconds. That matched the time Ben recalled frantically calling for Alpha Team with no response. It matched Jake's panicked emergence moments later reporting Mike vanished. His past device was manually turned off, Ben whispered, the pieces clicking with horrifying clarity. Found near his gear. If someone subdued him quickly, quietly, in that thick smoke, they could have turned off his pass first so it wouldn't scream. Then, maybe they took his radio? Or he dropped it during a struggle, and they grabbed it. Later? But the signal... Exactly. Miller's voice was tight. The radio was still on, broadcasting its presence silently, for over 3 minutes after Mike stopped communicating. Then, poof, manually powered down. At 11:42 and 17 seconds p.m., right when Jake realized he was gone. Someone turned that radio off, Ben. Either Mike, in a situation where he couldn't speak but could reach the power switch, or someone else. Someone who was there, in the smoke, with him. The image was horrifying. Mike, potentially incapacitated but alive, his radio silently signaling his location for 3 crucial minutes while chaos raged around him. Then, the deliberate snuffing out of that electronic lifeline at 11:42 and 17 seconds p.m., followed by the careful stripping of his SCBA, the placement of his gear, the vanishing act. And 5 years later, the burial of the damning radio, the device that could have led rescuers right to him in those vital minutes. It wasn't just disappearance. It wasn't just foul play. It was an execution, a vanishing meticulously staged in the heart of a roaring inferno. The buried radio wasn't just evidence. It was a dark punchline to a 5-year-old joke. The mystery hadn't deepened. It had crystallized into something monstrously deliberate. The question was no longer just where is Mike Riley. It was who was standing beside him in the smoke at 11:42 p.m. on November 3rd, 2018, turning off his radio, sealing his fate. The hunt, chilling and personal, had truly begun. The revelation hung in Ben Carter's office like acrid smoke. 11:42 and 17 seconds p.m. The precise moment Mike Riley's electronic heartbeat ceased. Not failure, not accident, a deliberate silencing. Detective Miller's words echoed. Asterisk, someone was there. In the smoke. With him. Asterisk, the carefully staged scene. The past device off, the gears seemingly shed, the vanished man, now screamed of premeditation. A murder disguised as a vanishing, orchestrated in the heart of chaos. The buried radio was a taunt, a dark signature left behind years later. The hunt wasn't just renewed. It was personal, visceral, and terrifying. Forensics had yielded little physical evidence from the radio itself. The soil analysis, however, held one tiny anomaly Lisa Chun hadn't initially highlighted. Mixed with the predominant warehouse soil, ash, concrete dust, industrial grime, were minute traces of organic matter, decomposed pine needles, and a specific type of clay not native to the immediate industrial park. It was trace, almost negligible, easily dismissed as contamination. But Lisa, dogged and meticulous, cross-referenced it. The composition matched soil samples from a heavily wooded county park located 15 miles northwest of the city, near the reservoir. A popular spot for hiking and, significantly, isolated enough for clandestine activities. It was a whisper, not a shout, but it was the first tangible lead pointing away from the fire scene itself. Detective Miller focused like a laser. Who had the means, the opportunity, and, crucially, the knowledge? Knowledge of firefighter procedures? Knowledge of the warehouse layout? Knowledge that the thick smoke near the east wall provided perfect cover? The list was agonizingly small. Other firefighters. Ben recoiled from the thought. His crew? Brothers? The suspicion was a poison, but he couldn't ignore it. Miller, however, cast a wider net, revisiting everyone connected to the scene that night. Warehouse security, minimal. First responders from other units, utility workers, even the demolition crew leader from a year later. Meanwhile, the radio's silent 3-minute broadcast period haunted Ben. 11:39 p.m. to 11:42:17 p.m. Mike was down or subdued, but his radio was live. Someone was there, deciding his fate, while the electronic pulse silently screamed his location. Why didn't Jake hear anything? Jake Peterson, Mike's partner, emerged seconds after the signal died, reporting Mike vanished beside him. Ben revisited Jake's statement for the 100th time. The thick, rolling smoke wave, reaching out, nothing. Was Jake telling the whole truth? The possibility was a knife to Ben's heart. He watched Jake now, the haunted look deepening, the jumpiness. Guilt or trauma? Miller pursued the soil lead. Quietly, he obtained work records for anyone employed on the warehouse demolition crew 18 months after the fire, cross-referenced with residents living near or having connections to the county park area. One name surfaced, Ray Kowalski, the bulldozer operator who found the radio. Kowalski had moved to the area 2 years prior, taking the construction job. His listed address was an apartment complex but vehicle registration records showed a pickup truck. Miller pulled Kowalski's background. Ex-military, honorable discharge, infantry. Trained in fieldcraft, including burying things. No criminal record. Seemingly ordinary. But he was there, operating heavy machinery over the very spot where the radio was buried. He found it. Then, wrestling with his own demons, focused on the night. The radio silence. He requested the complete audio logs from dispatch again, listening not just to Alpha Team, but to all traffic between 11:39 p.m. and 11:42 and 17 seconds p.m. Amidst the crackle of flames, shouted orders, the rush of water, he heard it. Faint, almost swallowed by the chaos. On a different channel, Charlie Team's frequency, assigned to perimeter security and water supply near the hydrant on the north side. A burst of static, then a muffled, guttural sound. A grunt? A choked-off cry? It lasted less than a second, logged at 11:41 and 5 seconds p.m. Then, dead air on that channel for several seconds before normal traffic resumed. It could have been anything, a firefighter straining equipment noise. But its timing, just over a minute before Mike's radio died, sent chills down Ben's spine. He played it for Miller. Perimeter security, Miller breathed. Charlie Team was spread thin. Hydrant duty, isolated spot. He pulled the duty roster. Only 2 firefighters assigned to Charlie Team that night. Veterans handling the pump and hose relay. Both solid. Alibis confirmed years ago. But who else was near that hydrant? Utility workers? Police securing the outer tape? Or someone who shouldn't have been there? Miller turned his attention back to Ray Kowalski. Quiet surveillance began. Kowalski lived a routine life. Work a local bar home. No obvious signs of wealth or stress. Miller dug deeper into Kowalski's military history. His old unit specialized in reconnaissance and explosives disposal. Familiarity with complex gear, pressure situations, and silence. Miller also tracked down Kowalski's previous residence before moving here. A town only 30 miles from the county park with a distinctive soil. Kowalski had lived there for 5 years before relocating here, just before taking the demolition job at the warehouse site. The pieces were circumstantial, but the pattern was forming. Miller needed leverage. He decided to re-interview Kowalski officially about finding the radio, hoping to catch a slip. He invited Ben to observe from behind the one-way glass. Kowalski arrived at the station on August 30th, looking wary but cooperative. Miller was calm, professional. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Kowalski. Just tying up loose ends on the Riley case. You found the radio August 16th, correct?" "Yeah, like I told the guy at the desk," Kowalski replied, shifting in his chair. "Buried. About 3 feet down. My blade hit it. Did you notice anything unusual around where you found it? Disturbed earth recently? Anything out of place?" "Nah, just dirt and junk. Been moving earth for weeks there." His eyes flickered toward the mirror Ben stood behind. "You serve in the Army, right? Explosive ordnance disposal. That takes some serious nerve and attention to detail." Kowalski's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, long time ago. What's it got to do with a busted radio?" "Just background," Miller said smoothly. "EOD techs know their gear. Know radios, communication protocols. Know how to disable things quietly." He let the implication hang. "You moved here 2 years ago from Cedar Ridge, right? Nice area. Close to Willow Creek Park. Do a lot of hiking out there." Kowalski's knuckles whitened where he gripped the chair arms. "Sometimes. So what? The soil where you found the radio," Miller continued, his voice dropping, becoming colder, had traces of pine needles and a specific clay found predominantly in Willow Creek Park. "How do you think that got there, Mr. Kowalski?" "Mixed deep into the casing of a radio buried for 5 years." Kowalski's face drained of color. I don't know. That's crazy. It was just buried in the dirt. Maybe it got there during the fire? Or after?" Panic edged his voice. "The fire didn't bury it 3 feet deep," Miller stated flatly. "The demolition didn't bury it. Someone dug a hole. Someone who knew the site, knew where Mike Riley vanished, and knew how to bury something deep enough to hide it for years." Someone who frequented Willow Creek Park. Someone like you. Kowalski shot up, his chair scraping loudly. This is bullshit. I found a damn thing. That's all. I want a lawyer. Now. His protest was too loud, too sudden. The fear in his eyes wasn't just confusion. It was the fear of being caught. Miller didn't push. He let Kowalski leave, stewing in the accusation, knowing the pressure would build. Ben, watching, felt a cold certainty. This was the man who stood beside Mike in the smoke. The next move was risky. Miller obtained a warrant for Kowalski's apartment and truck, searching for evidence linking him to the park soil. Digging tools, or anything related to the night of the fire. The apartment yielded nothing. The truck, however, parked in a lot beneath Kowalski's building, was different. Forensic techs meticulously vacuumed the interior. Under the driver's seat mat, embedded deep in the carpet fibers, they found minuscule fragments, charred, melted plastic of a type consistent with Firefighter helmet components, and flecks of dried mud containing pine needles and the unique Willow Creek clay. It was trace evidence, but crucially, it linked Kowalski's vehicle directly to both the contaminated soil on the radio and to fire debris. Evidence he'd carried with him, unknowingly, for years. Miller also pulled security footage from the gated entrance to Kowalski's apartment complex for the week following the warehouse fire in November 2018. The footage was grainy, mostly overwritten after a month. But one fragment remained. Timestamped November 5th, 2018, 1:17 a.m., Kowalski's truck entering the complex. The bed appeared damp, muddy. It was circumstantial, but it placed him near the site after the initial searches, during the time the radio could have been buried. Confronted with the soil match in his truck and the damning timestamp, Kowalski cracked. Facing the ruin of his life and the undeniable evidence, he confessed on September 1st, 2023, his voice flat, devoid of remorse. It was an accident, he insisted, staring at the interrogation table. That fire. I said it. Small job, just a distraction. I was hired to retrieve something hidden in that warehouse. Stolen goods. Electronics. The fire got out of control faster than I thought. Way faster. He swallowed hard. I was trapped near the east wall when the smoke got too thick. Couldn't get out the way I came. Then he came through the smoke. The firefighter. Big guy. He saw me, so I didn't belong. He grabbed for his radio, was going to call in, expose me. Kowalski described the frantic struggle in the blinding, choking smoke. Mike, strong and focused, tried to subdue him and call for help. Kowalski, fueled by panic and training, fought back viciously. He was reaching for the transmit button. I hit him. Hard. With a chunk of pipe lying there. He went down. His alarm started shrieking. Kowalski mimicked turning a knob. I knew what it was. Turn it off. Then his radio, it was still squawking, his breathing loud in it. I didn't know if he was dead. I just grabbed the radio. Yanked it off. Turned it off too. Took it. I dragged him back into a deeper pocket of smoke, behind some fallen crap. I took his air mask, figured, if he wasn't dead, the smoke would finish it. Made it look like he got lost. I got out through a gap in the fence I'd cut earlier. He described returning days later, after the site was cold, but before the final cleanup, burying the radio deep where he thought it would never be found. Finding it, that was bad luck. Or maybe not. Ben listened from behind the glass, nausea warring with rage. Mike hadn't vanished. He'd been murdered protecting people from a fire set by a thief. His final act was trying to apprehend a criminal. Kowalski led them to the spot, near the old fence line, away from the main collapse zone. Excavation on September 3rd uncovered Mike Riley's remains, still clad in the scorched remnants of his station uniform beneath layers of debris, his SCBA mask removed. Clutched in his hand, protected by his turnout coat, were two small laminated crayon drawings, one of a fire truck, one of a smiling family, made by Lily. He'd carried them into every fire. The rain fell softly on September 10th, 2023, as they laid Michael James Riley to rest with full honors. The entire city seemed to line the streets. Sarah held Lily close, their tears mingling with the rain. Finally knowing the truth, The monstrous why answered, but the hole in their hearts forever gaping. Ben Carter stood ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on the flag-draped coffin. The ghost was laid to rest, the mystery resolved, but the cost felt immeasurable. The fire was out, the embers cold, but the memory of the man who vanished in his smoke, only to be found by the persistence of truth and a single, buried mistake, would burn forever in the heart of Station 17. Justice was served, yet the silence after the final bell tolled felt heavier than the smoke had ever been.